Hello there, Qckslvrslash, and today I have a review of the Tier 8 American battleship, the North Carolina. And what a relief it was to get into this ship. She looks the part, that kind of iconic late war American battleship, long, sleek hull, triple-barreled turrets, and I just love her. One of my favorite ships in real life is the Missouri. I've been on her when I went to Hawaii when I was in the Navy, and just the awe and size of these things really impressed me, and I've never forgotten that. So this was the first battleship line that I ground out to 10 because I wanted the Iowa, I wanted the Montana, and the North Carolina did not disappoint either. It really only has two competitors right now, the Amagi and the Tirpitz. Soon that will be joined by the Bismarck, which is very similar to the Tirpitz, and I'll cover one or two of the differences that I've seen from the stats that have been posted about the Bismarck. But overall, when you compare her to the Amagi, which is the current in tech tree battleship, both have a survivability of 82, very comparable artillery ratings. The North Carolina wins on AA defense, the Amagi wins on maneuverability, and then the North Carolina wins on concealment. They're very comparable ships. The real difference is the Amagi has 5 of these twin-barreled turrets, giving her 10 total guns. Unfortunately, most of her firepower is in the rear, whereas the North Carolina has these triple turrets and 2/3 of her firepower is up front. And really how you end up driving this is you approach the enemies from about this point, as you'll see in the game I'm going to share. The rounds just run down your hull and bounce off. Your rear turret is almost there for decoration and engaging anything that's chasing you. So a little deeper look into her. She's got 66,000 hit points, 305 millimeters of armor at the high end, only 19 in the thinner places, and then 21% torpedo reduction, which is really not that good. When you look at the Amagi, 45%, the Japanese respected the torpedoes and put massive bulges on, and even the Tirpitz, and to my knowledge the Bismarck will also have better torpedo protection. But what makes this ship is really her armament. These 406 millimeter guns, 30-second reload, 38.3 turret 180, and 13,100 damage out of the AP shells. The velocity between the AP and HE is different, the HE being a little quicker, so you have to aim differently when you're using the different shells. But these guns are fairly reliable, other than they control you a little bit sometimes with their inaccuracy. When you look at the Amagi and her 410 mils, she's got 227, and the Tirpitz comes in with 276. So when you look at the 293 millimeters of maximum dispersion that the North Carolina gets, she really isn't the best long-range shooter, and you have to get a little bit closer if you want to put those accurate shots in. Luckily, as long as you keep your bow to the enemy, you're going to be able to tank that damage. But the big improvement that you see in this ship over all the American predecessors is you finally have a respectable main battery firing range. Trying to play that Colorado, you only have the option of putting in the main battery firing range mod because you just can't compete without it. Whereas finally you get the option to do some different modifications. The other thing that the North Carolina brings with it is essentially an Atlantis strapped to either side. Not quite. She's only got 5 of these twin-barreled 127 millimeter turrets, but it's still a respectable amount, and without the commander skill, still 6.3 kilometer range, and you've got a fire chance, and those fires can add up. Moving on, she has best AA in her class, just outdoing my Amagi, and that's an Amagi with considerably more commander skills than my North Carolina, and it beats the Tirpitz by a good amount, the Tirpitz having a 66 rating. Now the main difference that I've seen between the Tirpitz and the upcoming Bismarck is the Bismarck loses the torpedoes, but it gains an awful amount of AA, bringing it up to I think about the 80 mark. So the the Bismarck really is going to be able to do that kind of anti-air battleship build. When you move into maneuverability, 27.5 top speed, 760 meter turning radius, and a 17.3 second rudder shift. Now when you look at the modules, I really do think that the rudder shift could help this ship out, and it's definitely what I put on my Montana. But at tier 8 I find the HE spams a little more real, and I would rather have the increased damage control capability over that better rudder shift. And finally, you look at concealment, 15.2 kilometer detectability, beats the Japanese by about 1.5 kilometers, and very similar to the Germans. So overall, really solid ship, and she performs well without her upgrades. The B hull really just gives you some extra hit points and some rearranged AA. She still does 24.5 knots with stock propulsion, and right out of the gate you have a 21 kilometer gunfire range, so you're not crippled. This ship improves as you get the modules, but it's not some of those ones where it is terrible without them. For my upgrades, I've put main battery mod 1 on because you really can't afford for one of your front batteries to get knocked out, especially when you're doing that nose-in kind of brawling tanking fight. If you lose one of those turrets, that's essentially half your gun power gone because your rear turret isn't getting into it much. I've got secondary battery modification 2 equipped to push the range of my secondaries out, and when my captain gets there I am putting advanced fire training on him because it pushes them out to about 8.2 kilometers if I recall, and I really do enjoy that. It also helps the commander skill, at least with your AA, and pushes her up to a very respectable AA rating. And as I said before, I've got damage control 1 and 2. I think steering gear would be more than appropriate in this slot, and I don't have something in my final slot, partly because I can't really afford it right now. I know I have 6 million credits, but the German line's coming out soon and I want to be able to get through those ships quickly to really get a feel for the line and be able to put a couple reviews out. If I did put something in, I know people who try to do the concealment build, but I really feel that increased acquisition and spotting range and acquisition of torpedoes is the more valuable one in this slot. The stealth battleship build I find a little more gimmicky because the second you fire you're detected, and pretty much any destroyer and cruiser is still going to be able to sneak up on you. No surprise in my consumables that I've got premium damage control and premium repair party in conjunction with my captain skill. That gives me 5 repair parties, allowing me to recuperate an incredible amount of hit points and just take a beating, take those fires in the floods, and walk away alive. Now, quick look at the captain. Tier 1, I've got basic fire training. Tier 2, I have expert marksman to increase that turret traverse and really help me track targets. Tier 3, superintendent. Hit Tier 4 when I get it. I am going to go with advanced fire training. Then I'm going to start backfilling with the survivability skills until I can afford a Tier 5 skill, at which point I will probably put manual fire control like I have on my Montana. But that's a long ways off, and that's why I'll backfill with these survivability skills, because they're active all the time and they do help you. And then I'll just spend the gold to retrain when he gets there. So overall, I think it's a great ship, and I hope this gameplay footage really displays how to play her and the kind of damage she can take and the damage she can put out in most games. Like, it's rare, unless you get caught out by a destroyer, to not do at least your hit points and damage unless you give someone your broadside. So we found ourselves a game. I'm playing alongside Savea and Flying Goomba. Savea just got his North Carolina. Part of the reason I'm actually doing the review is when he got it, I decided to go back to mine and drive it alongside him. And we've got Flying Goomba in his Tirpitz. We're on Trap in a domination battle, and you can see we've kind of hit the jackpot. Tier 8 game, Tier 7 carriers, so they're not as big a threat. And only a couple destroyers. Nothing like getting into a game in a battleship when there's like 6 enemy destroyers, because you just feel a little useless. You end up getting driven around the map by the enemy torps. So that's not going to be so much a problem in this one. So off the bat, we agree, we're going to A. We've got 3 battleships, a cruiser and a destroyer with us. We can push in and just take A by force. And especially when you start to factor in the targeted fire that the 3 of us can put down. We're always playing on voice with one another. So we call out targets, you know, enemy turrets or something. Or if there's more than one, we'll use the name and all of us will start shooting at it as a way of erasing enemy ships quicker. And you can do that focus fire using F3. When you see a ship that you think is fairly vulnerable to friendly fire, tag them with F3. It can draw your friendly attention towards that ship and really help you out. So you can see pretty much the rest of the team is going for Charlie. And you would hope with that many people up there that they would be able to hold and push in. They've got 2 battleships, 3 cruisers and a destroyer. That is more than enough to pretty much fight anything you're going to run across. And you'll see here in a couple moments, we're facing pretty much equal forces at A. A couple enemy battleships are going to show up between A and B, and there's an enemy destroyer and cruiser down in the south end of A. So our teams are actually splitting up pretty evenly. We have an extra battleship down in the south, they're going to have an extra one up in the north. So one of the big bonuses to getting into the North Carolina, and then the Iowa just amplifies it more, is this improved speed. The New Mexico and the Colorado were not fast ships, and you could find yourself out of position, unable to contribute because you just don't have the speed to cross the map and chase down that enemy or push through caps to get them. Whereas at 27.5 knots, you really do start to gain that ability in the North Carolina. And there's that pair of enemy battleships I was speaking of earlier. I can't fire over this island, I keep looking for the shot, and I'm just going to have to wait to the opening between these islands to unload a broadside. I'm also subconsciously thinking about torpedoes just coming straight at that edge of land, because if I were a DD down in the south of A, that's where I would put them. So I angle in a little more to hug the land just a little closer and keep my ship safe for longer as I look for the enemy North Carolina to show up. I don't feel I have a shot on that Tirpitz. He's got his stern to me and is driving away. I really feel it would just be a waste of the shots, so I wanted to shoot the North Carolina, but he never gets spotted.
Torpedoes, dead ahead.
And there's those torpedoes I was talking about.
Torpedoes to starboard.
So if you're ever in a destroyer and no targets to shoot at, as I always say, just put it towards edge of land, luck chuck, and you might get lucky. Had I been a little less situationally aware, I may have just driven wider around the corner and eaten one of those. So I fire a volley of AP out at that Lo Yang, hit him with 1 over penetration, good for 10% damage, 1300 out of the shell. Really not what I wanted. I would have liked 4,000 or 5,000 out of that volley. But no time to focus on a destroyer because the enemy North Carolina gets respotted. And I'm not about to chase a destroyer. We've got A. We got what we came for. Our team managed to capture C up in the north. So we as a group are going to turn, go for B, push in, and try to take the 3rd cap point. Another big bonus with the North Carolina over the Colorado is just the gun range. The 16.7 that the Colorado has without upgrades, just
Torpedoes to starboard.
it doesn't cut it compared to what the Nagato, which I believe is 18 or 19 stock. You just always end up outranged, and if you don't put the gunfire range mod in, you end up coming across enemy Colorados who can just outperform you. You can't catch them because they're the same ship, and they just stay right outside your gun range and shoot at you all day. So you kind of ended up, in the previous ones, hamstrung into certain mods. Whereas I feel the North Carolina on the high tier Americans, there's a couple different valid builds you can go with. You can go with what I choose, which is lots of secondaries, you know, boost the AA, and kind of ends up protecting you. And I play all my ships very brawly, so for me, that's what works. You can also go super survivability build, or you can go the concealment build. All are kind of valid in their own right, and it comes down to how you play it. So I use my first repair party of 5, and I'm basically going to take myself to just under full health again. And having those 5 repair parties, just, you don't care about a single fire anymore.
Torpedoes to starboard.
So that enemy North Carolina shows me a side, I put the rounds in the air, I then have to focus on these torpedoes, 3 of which hit my friendly division mate, Flying Goomba, unfortunately, and I managed to get about 7,000 on that North Carolina. But as we move into Cap B, all those ring islands to the south start to protect from torps, and I'm going to go north of that island to really just block them off. And what that enemy North Carolina doing is not how you drive a North Carolina. There's one Citadel for 14,000, and I managed to get another 7,000. He's driving broadside on to a group of battleships, and the armor on these is just not enough to keep an enemy battleship out. Even lower tier or higher tier. I had a game earlier today where we were shooting at a Montana 20 kilometers away, and we were managing to get Citadels with this thing. The armor is reliable when you go nose on. So I fire at the Pensacola, another big Citadel, knock it down to 8,000 health. Goomba starts shooting, puts 2 shells in, knocking him down to about 5,000, and he swings right to get his stern turrets on, and going for the finishing shots, manages to get him. So right now the game is looking pretty positive. We've got 3 of the caps, the enemy is taking 1 back, both teams have lost 1 ship, and really still pretty much on full health. So you can see me pondering that shot with that enemy North Carolina. He's angled how I am, and really it's not a situation I'm going to penetrate him. So rather than waste the shots, I look around, I find that other North Carolina, and we trade Citadels. But once again, having 5 repair parties, I activate mine, I'm going to recover most of that health. He just isn't able to, and he's sitting on 20,000 HP now. And this is how you want to approach enemy ships. Nose in, really relying on your front 2 turrets to do the work. Your rear one's kind of a bonus if you get something off the side. And you don't want more than about 20 degrees off the bow. That's where you want to keep, particularly the enemy battleships. Even enemy cruisers, particularly that kind of 7 or 8 kilometer range. They're going to start getting their AP shells flat enough that if you give them their side, they're going to put consistent damage in. So I go for a finishing shot on that enemy North Carolina, and I don't get it. Only put in about 6,000 damage. And I start to eat gunfire from a Mogami. So this is kind of the use of the back turret. Is between shots with your front ones, in your main engagement, you can just fire the back turret, add an enemy ship that happens to be a little wider out, keep them pushed away. And this is really the first time you see a display of the anti-air. Those were at the cruiser destroyer a couple kilometers ahead of me, and I managed to shoot 3 of them down. Had they been coming for me, that added approach time, I probably would have gotten another 1 or 2, really taking 2 bomber squadrons down to a single ship apiece. So with that enemy turret sailing broadside on, he's who I choose to go for. I'm showing my side to him because I've got a North Carolina right in front of me, and I'm just trying to average all the ships that are facing me, you know. You can't point your bow at them all, so you have to pick and choose who's your biggest threat. Unfortunately, I'm about to be given no choice as I get a couple torpedo bombers coming at me. I've already shot a pair of them down, and I end up shooting all but 3 when they manage to drop, but I finish the squadrons off. And this is where I end up in a bit of trouble. I'm broadside on to their New Mexico and North Carolina, there's the turrets ahead of me, and enemy York, and I just don't have the rudder shift and maneuverability quite to make it past the edge of this island as I'm trying to bring my bow back around, and I end up running aground.
The ship is on fire.
Luckily for me, no one's really paying attention to me right now, so I'm able to put my engines into reverse, get off the rock, and get moving forward again without really taking any harassment. So I see that York, he's going for an edge land, he is going to have to turn to the right. So I lead and I fire as if he's going to turn a little further right to clear that edge land, and I'm rewarded with pretty hefty shots. 12,000 damage, no citadels, but 3 penetrations. And this is kind of where the game starts to turn for us. You can see we're down on ships. That enemy destroyer has gone back to A and capped it. We've got 1 cruiser right in the very north doing God knows what, and another one in the south doing the exact same. Like, they're completely out of position, they're not helping our carrier, our friendly turrets has barely moved from cap, so it really is right now the 3 of us versus 3 of their battleships and 2 cruisers. And it kind of becomes a little hard to pick. We decided to focus down the New Mexico, we got rid of him, and my next target's gonna be Harrison, this North Carolina, because I've got him on low health. He's coming out, I was hoping him to be a little more side on, but he was playing it smart, and I'm just gonna stay bow into him. I use my rear gun to fire at the other North Carolina, allowing my fronts to focus on Harrison. And luckily now he is giving me his side. I swing my rudder over, get the shot off before he does, and erase him. Getting my first kill, and I'm already up to 138,000 damage, and this game is not done yet. Unfortunately for us, we lose Flying Goomba. He wasn't able to heal enough of that torpedo damage he took early in the game and got erased, and that enemy destroyer is now capping B. You can see that first of those 3 volleys with the rear turret, not one of them hit at 5 kilometers away, and that's kind of one of the downsides to these American battleships. They're not quite as accurate as their Japanese counterpart, but they'll do the trick. I eat a hefty shot from their turrets. Really wasn't paying attention to where he was. I should have come further right. But I'm focused on trying to get rid of this North Carolina before I lose Savea, and really my only ally that I can count on right now, because those cruisers are still just kind of driving around doing whatever. You can see my secondaries firing away. They've lit one fire already, put 30 shells in, and I get a Citadel on that North Carolina erasing him. So I was feeling a little bit better after that. I was like, okay, we're not out of this. And then I looked at the map. Enemies have all 3 caps. My teammates are doing God knows what. That Tirpitz was on full health up until now. He had barely participated in the battle. And I don't know, there's a reason he's pink. And I don't want to judge him based on one game, but clearly things have happened in other games where he's been doing some team killing, and I suspect he may have just kind of purchased his way into tier 8 to drive the Tirpitz, or may be a bot. So I come around the corner, I get my bow in, I take no damage from that volley on the Tirpitz. I'm trying to push out to get my guns far enough forward to shoot, and unfortunately in that time he gets his bow far enough over to deflect all of mine. And this is where I start to get into trouble. I'm in no position to be closing a Tirpitz. He's got torpedoes. I have to turn away, and that gives him my broadside. I eat a big Citadel. I get lit on fire. Once the torps are clear, I instantly repair that. And I'm trying to think how to maximize my remaining hit points. I'm going to keep my rear to the Tirpitz, shoot at him, and I want to close these 2 enemy cruisers that are on low health just to my side. Because if I can kill the York, I can stay in this game. Unfortunately, the game ended before I managed to get a shot on those cruisers. I really think killing one of them could have kept me in it, but I got 443,000 credits, 3,700 experience, fireproof, dreadnought, high caliber, Confederate, 171,000. I put a good number of shells in, 5 Citadels. Overall, just solid performance. Put me at the top of the team. And God, I wish we had a little more time. I really felt I could have stayed in that and killed pretty much everything remaining if necessary. And you can see 72 shells, so put in 171,000 and about 10,000 damage from my secondaries between the fires and the actual battery hits. And that's why I like to boost my secondary performance. And going in, 262,000 after all my expenses, and 5,000 for a commander that really needs a few more skills. So I hope this taught you a bit about the North Carolina, how she can be used, how I like to use her, and I do really enjoy this ship. I think it's, in some aspects, has a bad rating. I know a couple people have been a little leery about it, but I really like it, and you drive it right, you put the bow in, she performs solid. Anyways, I'm Qckslvrslash. If you enjoyed it, please give me that thumbs up. Would love a subscription, and as always, I'll have another one for you guys tomorrow.